All right, good evening, everyone. It is 7 o'clock. Welcome to the Bedminster Township Committee meeting, our regularly scheduled meeting for March 1st, 2021. Recognize that we have full attendance of the Township Committee. Committeeman Stevenson, Committeeman Hickey, Committeewoman Moreski are with me in Town Hall. Committeewoman Fernandez is participating by Zoom, so we have a full complement of Township Committee. Ms. Sullivan, may we please have the Open Public Meetings Act statement?
Yes, sir. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Township Committee was sent to the Courier News in Somerville and to the Burnsville News in Whippany to all subscribers, and also posted here at the Municipal Building as of January 7th, 2021.
Great, thank you. Please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before we start the meeting, I'll do what we've been doing for nearly a year, which is go over the COVID numbers for Bedminster Township. And off the Somerset County website, the numbers that we are seeing for Bedminster Township, we are now at a total, this is a total from when they started the count almost a year ago. Actually, it probably was a little over a year ago, to today, 312 cases, 312 confirmed cases in Bedminster, and we remain at 5 fatalities. I think as those of you who have heard me in the last couple of months, back in November, December, we were seeing, and even January, we were seeing reports of 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 a day. And it has definitely leveled off the last few months. We might be seeing 1 additional case, 2 additional cases a day. Sometimes we've gone days without having any new cases. So this is great. However, we are still in the pandemic. And, you know, once again, our defenses against the spread of the virus, masks, social distancing, as we are up here, everyone is pretty much spread out, and washing your hands. So as the vaccine becomes more widespread, hopefully those numbers continue to improve. But until everyone has it, or at least we hit that threshold point, please remain vigilant. The other thing before we get going with the rest of the meeting is an update on the Larkspur fire over at the Village Green neighborhood, which happened very early,
February 13th.
February 13th, Saturday morning. So at our first meeting, which was after that fire, which was the following Tuesday, because let's see, 14th, 15th was the President's Day, so our meeting was on the 16th. We said that we were going to run a fund drive. We all took a vote, passed a resolution to establish the account, and in a week or so, we had raised about $10,000 or more. Today, we've received a total of $4,105 in gift cards and a total of $18,600 in cash. So that's a total of $22,705 in 2 weeks. So not only have we raised money, but there's also been a distribution of funds to the displaced residents. And that was, those funds were displaced as of February 23rd. There actually was a meeting here in Town Hall for reps from Village Green and the displaced residents. And at that time, there was about $11,000 in cash and gift cards distributed to the displaced residents. So it's just inspiring the response from our residents, the response from the community members, the response from the churches and the other organizations. This really goes, once again, to the heart of being in a small town. That there are folks who have lost everything, and there are folks who just are displaced and are not going to have access to their homes for some time. We've had the discussions with the contractors and the insurance adjusters for the association, and I think we've all had the discussions with our permitting and our construction group. Whatever it is that we need to do to expedite getting folks back into their homes, we've given that direction to those folks. So Bedminster Township staff is 100% on board with getting those folks back into their homes. And meantime, to the extent there's need for temporary housing, we've also, our administrative agent, CGP&H for Affordable Housing, has made itself available and has given out information regarding how to use the affordable housing funds for displacement, temporary housing costs, as well as for dues assistance. So to the extent that these folks are not going to be in position to pay their homeowner association dues while they're out of their units, there's assistance programs through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So it's one thing to get money, right? That's great. Even for donations, that's great. It's better to put that money to use and disperse it appropriately. So it's great to see that Bedminster Township is doing that. Public comments. Any members of the public have questions or comments they wish to make? If anyone is participating by phone, you can hit *9 on your dial pad, and that will identify you requesting an opportunity to make a public comment. If you are participating through Zoom, go to the bottom of the screen where it says Participants and click the button that says Raise Hand. And we'll give it a few moments so that any members of the public who wish to make a comment can do so. And Judy, we did have a member of the public that came in.
Let's check, they left.
They left?
Yes.
Car's gone? Okay.
I see no comments in there.
Okay, seeing no comments, we will move on. Approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes, February 16th, 2021 Township Committee meeting. Does anyone have any comments or questions regarding those minutes from that meeting? Seeing none, may we have a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Abstain. It's Mother's birthday. Good excuse.
Thank you.
Permits and raffles, we have two, let's see, one raffle approval. So the first is a hole-in-one contest to benefit the Special Olympics of New Jersey on June 21, 2021 from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. at Fiddler's Elbow Country Club, 811 Rattlesnake Bridge Road, Bedminster, New Jersey. And the second is an off-premise merchandise raffle to benefit the Willow School on May 21st, 2021 from 6, doesn't say p.m. or a.m., we'll just go make it 6 a.m. just in case, to 10 p.m. at the Willow School, 1150 Pottersville Road, Bedminster Township. Any comments or questions regarding those two permits? Seeing none. Motion to approve?
So moved with it being 6 a.m.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, now's the time that we would typically do monthly report discussions by subcommittee chair. Let's rearrange the tonight's meeting because we do have a number of folks participating who are particularly interested in the public hearing for ordinance 2021-009, 002. So what I'm going to do is we're going to move that public hearing up to this part of the meeting, and we will return to monthly report discussions and the rest of the meeting after we run through the public hearing. So may we have a motion to open the public hearing for ordinance 2021-002.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so the public hearing is open. So we've gone through the first read and introduction of ordinance 2021-002. This is an ordinance that amends our land use section and creates a new zone district to be known as Office Research Village Mixed Use District. This ordinance comes to us from the Bedminster Township Land Use Board, which made this recommendation for this ordinance as part of its master plan reexamination and its master plan amendment. The Land Use Board held a public hearing a couple of weeks ago where they made the changes to the master plan to reflect this new zone. That included a very specific ordinance that was sent back to the Township Committee. We ran the introduction. We referred it back to the Planning Board to make sure that they deemed it consistent or not inconsistent with the master plan, which of course they had just amended to actually accommodate this zone change. Judy, I believe you did receive a
Yes, I did
memo
receive
back.
a memo back
Right,
stating
and-
that it was found to be not inconsistent with the master plan.
Great. So this ordinance creates a mixed-use zone on property on Burnt Mills Road. And it is, for those who are listening, it's essentially across from Annie's Deli and that little complex right there, where it's the property that right now is the, what is that? That's the Bank of America?
Yes.
Bank of America, and a parking lot for the Bedminster One office complex. So what this ordinance would do would create a zone for that area that would allow mixed use, being some commercial, retail, and residential on that property, and that property then connects to the office building in the back. So that's the Bedminster One office building. So why are we doing this, right? Why are we doing this? This is a town that goes out of its way to buy up open space. We've litigated and defended our R10 zone, and we'd be willing to litigate our R10 zone today. We'd be willing to litigate the R3 zone. We've seen how the planning board treats applicants who come in looking to push around the edges, whether it's the R10 or the R3 or the R1, or even in the village neighborhoods. So why are we creating a new zone for additional residential? When I first was selected to be mayor for Bedminster Township, Joe Metelsky sent me, let's see, a series of articles that were run by the Star Ledger from June 2002. And I think they ran over a few weeks because there's a lot of these articles here. And those articles all have to do with a look back, and this is from 2002, on the Mount Laurel litigation and how the affordable housing litigation changed Bedminster and how it was implemented in Bedminster, and also took a look at how it was implemented in Bernards Township. Now, as in my daily life representing, folks on environmental issues in development situations, in fighting development situations, I am familiar with Mount Laurel litigation, and as most lawyers who take land use in law school will also go through those cases. In 2018, January 2018, Bedminster settled with Fair Share Housing Center regarding our third round COA obligations. So that's our affordable housing obligations for the third round. And a lot of the attorneys who are represent Bedminster, both at the township level and the land use board, said the settlement that John Bellardo negotiated with Fair Share Housing Center was extremely favorable to Bedminster. It recognized that we had a surplus of affordable housing units for sale in town, and that we had no further obligation for the third round to zone or build additional for sale affordable housing units. What the settlement agreement did say, however, was despite a surplus of for sale units, Bedminster was shy of its obligation to provide affordable housing for rent. So the settlement agreement from January 2018 says, Bedminster, what you need to do by the end of June 2021 is to have built or have zoned for 28 rental units for affordable, low, and moderate income. I think there's probably a very low obligation in there as well. So from January 2018, when that settlement was first signed by Mayor Parker, the Land Use Board sort of had to look to 2021. What are we going to do to get that zoning in place? And if we got that zoning in place by the end of June 2021, that would satisfy Bedminster's affordable housing obligations through 2025. So that's it. Get that zoning in place by June 2021, and you'll have satisfied your obligations through 2025. So the direction was given to the Land Use Board to start looking at those opportunities. Now, it just so happened that at the same time that the settlement agreement was coming through, that Mayor Parker had already convened, we'll call a blue ribbon committee, which was comprised of Bob Holtaway, Colin Hickey, before he became a committeeman, Jason Andrus, Tim Walter, and Lance Boxer. Was Lance on that?
No, Lance was not on that.
Was there another? Am I missing someone?
Just the four of us.
Okay, just the four. And part of that process was everything. Everything from the R10. Do we make the R10 an R20? Do we go to 20-acre zoning? I remember from some of the presentations, Mayor Holtaway was talking about form-based zoning in certain areas of town, and it was, showing that Bedminster had a commitment to good planning and good discussions. The Blue Ribbon panel made the presentation both to the Township Committee and to the Land Use Board, and then to the Land Use Board created a master plan subcommittee to take some of these ideas that the Blue Ribbon panel had suggested and to take the obligation reflected in the Fair Share Housing Settlement Agreement and start looking towards an eye of how to accommodate those 28 rental units. So after consideration by the master plans subcommittee in consultation with Frank Banish, and Frank's up there right now, back and forth, looking around Bedminster to where can you accommodate 28 rentals? Do you go up 206? Do you go down Lamington? Do you go deeper into the hills? And the answer to all that was no, probably not. And then an opportunity came up with the property that we're discussing today. And on Burnt Mills Road, but it's still in, actually, I think it's an OR zone right now, office research. So it's not in the R10. It's near the roads. Once again, this isn't something that we are affirmatively looking to do. It wasn't, once again, that we're encouraging development to come here, encouraging more residential. But this was satisfying an obligation that we have. And I come back to these articles about the Mount Laurel litigation. Because if we do not satisfy this obligation by June 2021, or by the end of June 2021, Bedminster will be susceptible to another builder's remedy lawsuit, where we will not get the opportunity necessarily to select the development that we want, how we want it, and where we want it. So I come back to it. We had an obligation under that settlement agreement. A process has been underway for 2+ years, maybe almost 3 years, to satisfy the obligations that were entered into in 2018. So, as the Master Plan Subcommittee was considering this one site, there were discussions held with the property owner, and the issue, as I see it, was we have an obligation to satisfy. We, being the town and certainly the land use board, can select and change the master plan to accommodate that obligation in the best location and in the best manner that works for Bedminster. That we can plan for that. And I'm using the term plan because, once again, that's what the planning board is supposed to do. They're supposed to plan. And in this case, that's exactly what the planning board, land use board did. There was, I would say maybe a year plus of master plan subcommittee, looking at issues, talking to the developer, looking around, coming back to the land use board, making presentation to the land use board, and then the land use board acting as a planning board, taking it to the next level. And the next level was not just, okay, we're gonna plop it, that location, we're done. No. That process became extremely detailed. What is this thing gonna look like? How is it gonna function? How is it gonna work with the rest of the town? How is it gonna work within your own property, with your office building? That was months from when those discussions first happened at the planning board, all in public meetings, to the point that the ordinance was framed out by the planning board. Very long process, back and forth, going into architectural details. What is it going to look like? And at the direction of Tom Collins, and maybe there was a back and forth with the land use board and the professionals, can we actually build those diagrams and those sketches into the ordinance? And the answer was yes. In fact, that's a great way of doing it. This way, everyone knows what is being proposed, what it's going to look like, how it's going to work. So that process went through. There were changes made. The entire land use board would sit there and talked about changes, whether it was the layout of the parking, whether it was the traffic flow through the parking area itself, was it the way that project would interact with Pluckman Schoolhouse Park next door? How would it work within Pluckman Village? And a little aside, I think we all up here recognize that Pluckman Village needs a little kick. Needs a little kick in the pants. Maybe some new blood, maybe some new architecture to bring some vitality back to the village. Certainly Doug's been talking to folks at the Pluckman Park Senior Project, and hope to have some good things to report on that. But you look around, there are buildings that were not being utilized, buildings that were falling into disrepair. So Pluckman Village needed a little something. And perhaps more importantly was traffic. Traffic. Perhaps in the first conversations about moving forward with the zoning efforts was, like it or not, anyone who's going to develop that property would inherit the traffic situation that plagues Pluckman, the intersection of 202, 206, and Washington Valley and Burnt Mills. And we all know, we've all been sucking that traffic, go through it just about every day, traveling south on 202, 206. It just gets backed up from Burnt Mills all the way to Hills Drive. And then the other problem is if you're coming from Burnt Mills and you want to make the left onto 202, 206, you may, if you're there at 8:30 in the morning, you may be cycling through 3 lights. So the direction was traffic improvements would have to be part of any development in that location. And we tasked Chuck Levo, who is the Bedminster Township traffic engineer, to look at some options, and those options were discussed both with the county and DOT, and there was some buy-in on those improvements, and that was certainly discussed with the property owner. Hey, if this all goes forward, this falls on your plate, on your dime. And there was consensus on that, and that's actually built into the ordinance that we're that we are considering. So once again, Bedminster Township is looking at this not so much from the perspective of, come on down, developers, doors open, bring us more density. We're looking at this from the perspective of, we have an obligation to fulfill, that the township can choose to plan, both in terms of location, in terms of making this a better project. Because the alternative is to let the courts decide. And to me, that is not a viable option. Now, in the meantime, from January 2018 to where we are today, there was a project approved by the Land Use Board sitting as a zoning board, and that's the project that we see up on Lamington Road, up by 206 on the Bedminster Village side of Lamington Road, and that is 33 units with a total of 5 affordable rentals. So that actually reduces the 28 that we are obligated to do under the settlement and satisfies 5 of those units. So the current obligation on Bedminster is to come up with 23 or zone for 23 affordable rental units. Those 23 units would be satisfied by the ordinance we're considering tonight. And so what I'd like to do now is to turn it over to our Bedminster planner, Frank Banish. And Frank, if you could just pick up from where I left off and give a presentation to the Township Committee and to the public on the details of this ordinance and the process that led us there.
Be happy to, Mayor. You did such a good job of describing the process that led us there that I'm not quite sure that I need to spend a lot of time on that. I think you did a really good job explaining that. We're talking about 3 documents tonight, and Chuck Olivo and I are going to explain to you how we are accommodating those additional 23 units that you mentioned. As you've said, one of the documents is the amendment to the master plan. I'm going to try to share my screen, see how that works. I have to admit I haven't done it before, but let's see. There you go. So what we're talking about here is that the ORV district was the village of Pluckeman's variant on the office research district, and it was intended to reduce the overall intensity so that it didn't overwhelm the village. As you know, Bedminster 1 has been there for a long time, and what you see in this exhibit, and if you can see my pointer here, the proposed ORV MU district is a portion of the former ORV district, and it is all of the KRE properties that are involved on the Bedminster 1 site. The proposed redevelopment has been, as you said, I think you made a good point that the process has been extremely responsive to concerns about municipal downtown design, walkability, the opportunity to make Pluckeman a friendlier and more engaging kind of place. And those are all placemaking things that we've talked about in the past in terms of our master plan. But the very specific proposal here is that those other 23 units will be part of a 160 unit development that would occur on a portion, and that is this northern portion of the ORV MU site. As part of the ordinance, we've gone to some length to try to define what it is that's intended to happen. So here we're looking at the Burnt Mills Road frontage of the site, the bank on the corner, and essentially the elimination of the bank that now comes in on the access road and replacement of that and the parking lot that's back in this vicinity with a mixed use multifamily residential concept that will bring both active commercial uses on the frontage. We'll invite public interaction along the frontage, including some features that are proposed out near the road, and will provide the residential units that are required to meet the obligation. If we look at a cross section, and we're not here looking at buildings, what we're looking at is the opportunity to create this outdoor engagement area where the traffic is not necessarily off-site, but it is coming through the site in a way that allows this area that will become very well activated with all these outdoor activities, outdoor dining and other outdoor activities, so that it will become an attractive gathering place in the downtown. We have included in the ordinance a preliminary design concept, and as the mayor mentioned, this is a concept that was, I apologize that I keep looking at my screen up here and you're all down there, but my screen's up there, sorry. A lot of thought went into creating a design that attempted to bring into the overall concept a way that we could break down a relatively large mass into discernible, definable, separate pieces, use precedents in our local architecture to identify the types of forms and volumes that are not uncommon in our countryside, and bring them together in a blending that I think is pretty masterful to accomplish those remaining 23 units. If we look at the overall site plan, the Bedminster 1 facility remains here. Opportunities for both the existing parking and future at grade parking are shown on this plan. We're still encouraging the opportunity for structured parking in the future, but we're basically dividing the site along this line so that the multifamily and commercial uses can occur along the frontage of Burnt Mills Road. Many people will notice that the frontage of Burnt Mills Road is a village on one side of the road and a lot of empty space on the other side of the road. The planning board talked many years ago and for some time about how we could further activate those portions of Pluckeman that could be more useful in making it a walkable and enticing place for people to visit. At the time we talked about that, there was really no reason to permit more development on an already developed site. But I think when we turned around and had to look for the place to put those additional units according to the Fair Share Housing Center settlement, this was by far the only site that rose to the level of being in the right place at the right time with the right opportunity. So I think that the board put a lot of time into thinking about this. The developer clearly put a lot of attention into thinking about it. We went to the trouble of executing some intent for the redesign of the intersection. And I'm not going to talk about that because Chuck Olivo will talk about that. But what I will talk about is we had one additional document. We went through the master plan reexamination again. And while I hate to scroll through pages, I'll do it quickly. One of the things that has been a recurring theme is how to bring more vitality to Bedminster and Pluckman villages, and how tourism could be a more important part of making them walkable downtowns. Pluckman Village has the benefit of having one of the few local art centers that I think has attracted artists, which are always a desirable element in town. We control that building in a way where we know it will continue to be used like that. And it's right next door to this property. We're making an opportunity available to increase this vitality. And while tourism isn't the only purpose, because tourism is a secondary impact of having a great place, we have to recognize that we have very significant historic resources. That little monument at the corner of the shopping center opposite this site, catty corner to this site, is a testimonial to the fact that Washington passed through here, but it's a relatively minor testimonial considering that the original West Point at the Pluckman Artillery was located where the Hills is now. So we have a lot of Revolutionary War history. We have a lot of reasons to be able to invigorate our downtowns with the kind of boots on the street that work well for the businesses and make the people who live here enjoy it. And the opportunity that we're trying to bring forward here, and what this reexamination report says, is we have seized on one opportunity, that is the need for some affordable housing, to advance another objective that we've discussed in the master plan and in the reexam in the past. So what we're doing right now, and I think the mayor didn't quite quantify, but I believe the settlement with Fair Share Housing Center acknowledged that we had many, many hundreds of for sale units more than we need to meet any obligation we might have. And I'll point out that Judge Serpentelli, who originally made the Allen Bean decision, said at the end of the 1990s that he thought Bedminster had probably met its fair share obligation halfway through the next century. And as it relates to fair share affordable for sale units, he's certainly right. We probably met it all the way through the next century. But when it comes to these family rentals, which we did not have, the only family rentals that were available in town are at Pluckman Park, which is a senior age-restricted development. So we are now fulfilling that obligation, returning to a position where just by zoning this property, we've met our obligation. But the town sincerely believes that this will be a welcome and beneficial element in the downtown. That's why the planning board changed the master plan to permit it. The re-exam acknowledged that it meets a lot of our prior objectives, and the zoning ordinance very carefully and sensitively limits the impacts to an appropriate area where we can manage them. And I think part of those managements, and the master plan calls explicitly for this, is that if we're going to have mixed commercial and residential uses that might include any of the commercial uses in the village neighborhood district, we need to do something with the intersection that everybody already knows makes us all sorry that we don't have a better solution. Part of the master plan and the zoning ordinance requires a better solution at that intersection. And that's probably where I should hand off to Chuck Olivo and let him take over.
Great. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Mayor.
Frank, I think
I'll unshare my screen.
Yeah, unshare your screen, and Frank, thank you for your work and assistance with the planning board in bringing us to this point. Chuck, we can control the screen over to you.
Excellent. Good evening, Mayor, members of the committee, members of the public. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to discuss some of the work that we've been doing. Mayor, as you mentioned, the intersection has certainly some concerns under existing conditions that have been operating that way for quite some time now. And as part of being the township's traffic consultant over the last 11 years, we have had the opportunity to study this intersection over more than a decade. And so we have great background in terms of historically how this intersection has operated. And that kind of brings us to where we are today in 2021. Now, as we all know, things have certainly changed within the last year due to the pandemic. But we had the opportunity in 2019, in early June, to conduct studies of the intersection. And it turns out, in terms of timing, that was probably not knowing what was coming in 2020, obviously, that turned out to be very important data. So what I'd like to do, Frank, if you could stop your share of the screen. Great.
There you go. All right.
Finally,
Perfect.
sorry.
And so then what I would
I'm new
like
at
to
that
do is...
Enjoy reading your email, Frank.
Let me just make sure that I've got the right screen up. Can everybody see my screen?
Looks white.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Chuck, you may have to share the particular window. So select that and then share.
All right, sounds good. All right, how about now?
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. So what I would like to try to walk through, if we could, is a video that we have of this intersection and some footage that I think will, as I narrate it, will describe some of the challenges that we see here. So are you able to see the motion? Are you able to see the video?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, great. So we are looking at footage from June of 2019 of the intersection proper, which we've been talking about, which is Route 202, 206. Now you'll see the footage rotate slightly, but towards the top of the video is north, cardinal direction. So we're heading towards Hills Drive as you're looking at the top of the screen. We have Washington Valley Road. You see my cursor, which forms the westbound approach of the intersection, Burnt Mills Road, which forms the eastbound approach. Then you have the opposite side of 202, 206, forming the northbound approach of the intersection. So let's talk about some of the challenges that we see, particularly in the morning. In the morning, you'll watch as the queue backs up in the eastbound left turn lane, and I'm using just an illustration with red marker to show that that queue backs up about 14 to 15 vehicles, and even sometimes more during the maximum queue in the morning peak hour. And we're looking at just around 8 o'clock in early June of 2019. What you'll also notice, and you'll see as the video plays, is that you'll notice that there's not nearly as many vehicles that are traveling west at this approach. Those are the conflicting vehicles that prevent a left-turning vehicle from making a left-hand turn and traveling up northbound 202, 206. So let's continue to watch. Part of the challenge that we have at this intersection is what we call the intersection or signal phasing. And not to get too much in the details of traffic engineering, I don't want to lose everybody on this meeting, but the phasing plays an important role in the efficiency of how an intersection operates. So what you see right now is 202, 206 north and south moving at the same time. That's a simultaneous phase where the north and south queues are able to clear during the signal phasing. What happens on the side street approaches of the county road system is that when 202, 206 is stopped at a red light, we enter what's called a split phase. And that split phase allows for the westbound traffic to move first, then clear, and then the eastbound traffic moves. Now that 202, 206 is generally coming to a stop, you'll note how the side street tends to ebb and flow. And so at this point, you see, we'll pause it for a moment, that the westbound approach is beginning to clear. If we take a look at the eastbound approach on Burnt Mills, you start to see the queuing that occurs. So during this time where we're watching the westbound flow, there's very little traffic. I'm going to hold it here for a moment. Take a look at what's happening on the westbound approach. Very little, if any, conflicting traffic with the westbound approach. I'm sorry, with the eastbound approach of Burnt Mills Road. And that continues for almost 20 seconds. For almost 20 seconds, there is no time being given to the eastbound approach, the northbound approach, or the southbound approach, and the queue continues to build along Burnt Mills Road. And so what we're looking at is essentially an emptied area approach traveling westbound, but the eastbound can't move because it's waiting for its turn at the signal to get the green phase. When it does ultimately get that green phase, these drivers are essentially doing the best they can to squeeze every ounce of green time out of this cycle. But unfortunately, what happens is the last 3 or 4 vehicles are not able to travel through the cycle, and you get what's called residual queuing, which leads to frustration, delay. I'm sure a number of us have sat through it. And more importantly, what we're looking to do under the proposed conditions is to fix this, because this is a challenge, and this is something that we note that has to be fixed in order for this intersection to operate more appropriately. So much of what I'm going to be speaking about this evening in terms of the improvements are geared towards efficiency. It's about taking what we have at this intersection and utilizing it in a much more efficient, much better form. So what I'd like to do now is take a look at the evening, because we've isolated some of the challenges that we see in the morning. So now we're going to take a look at the evening peak. Now, during the evening peak hour, and the mayor alluded to this early on, the challenges that we see in the evening are that the southbound approach, again, similar orientation to the video.
Hey, Chuck, I think we lost your screen.
You passed it.
Let's see, hold on. How about now?
Yeah.
There you go.
Great. So we are looking at right around 5:20, same day, June 2019. And again, similar orientation to what we had before. Towards the top is north as we're traveling towards Hills Drive. And you'll start to see what we all know to be the case, which is the centermost lane begins to back up through Pluckaman and extends about 1,700 linear feet, which is to the next intersection of Hills Drive, and sometimes even beyond that during some of the busier days of congestion. Generally from about 5 to 5:30 is when you have the worst queuing, the worst delays at the southbound approach. That is largely as a result of increased traffic demand during the evening peak hour as compared to the morning peak hour. Both the northbound approach and the southbound approach experience increased traffic volume demand during the evening peak hour. And the result of that is queues that extend along the northbound approach, close to the first driveway where bed 1 is located, but not nearly as far as the queuing that we see on the southbound approach. Southbound approach queuing can extend up to 1,900, 2,000 linear feet back through Pluckamin up to the Hills Drive intersection. Based on studies that we had done over the last 10 years, we have seen cut-through traffic utilize Hills Drive as a result of the frustration in not being able to travel through the intersection efficiently. We do see some queuing in the westbound approach of Washington Valley, but there is actually less traffic in the evening peak hour on a daily basis at both approaches, eastbound and westbound, than during the morning. So the issue in the evening is not the side street approaches, not the county road approaches. It tends to be the southbound approach predominantly. Now, one of the other things, I'll pause for a moment as we're looking at the southbound approach, that you'll notice is in this particular caption, you'll notice that there are 3 lanes that are all lined up with traffic volume. The left lane, the center lane, and the rightmost lane. Now we're starting to utilize all the capacity that we have at that southbound approach. However, there's something that occurs downstream that doesn't allow for this to be utilized in the most efficient way possible. And as we continue to watch, you'll notice that largely vehicles are traveling only in the lane closest to the double yellow line. So once the eastbound approach clears, we'll start to get a feel for how that works. Even though that's the case, that you have this rightmost lane at the southbound approach, and you have the ability to potentially stack about 6 vehicles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 vehicles back from that stop bar, it rarely happens. And the reason that it rarely happens is because most, if not all, of your vehicles are lined up for the leftmost lane. Because as you travel in the second through lane, there is a lane drop into the bed 1 property, meaning that functionally the rightmost lane serves very little purpose as vehicles are traveling southbound to engage vehicles at the intersection to begin to queue. So you're losing about 150 feet of stacking at the intersection because of losing the lane south of the intersection. And that continues to exacerbate the conditions that you see extending back from the stop bar at the southbound approach. And what that amounts to at about 5:30 every single day, about 5 to 5:30 every single day, is significant backups that occur back to Hills Drive. So what our proposal is to take a look at making this intersection operate more efficiently. And as part of working with the applicant's traffic engineer, we had the opportunity to meet with the Department of Transportation, who has jurisdiction over the intersection. And we had the opportunity to discuss the changes that we would like to propose at this intersection to improve the efficiency and to eliminate the extensive queuing that occurs back to Hills Drive and provides more green time to the southbound approach. Quite frankly, provides more green time to all of the approaches, because as we could see by observing what's happening in the morning and the evening, is there is a significant amount of wasted or lost time just by virtue of the fact that under these conditions, we have side street approaches, the westbound approach and the eastbound approach operating under a split phase, meaning only one of those phases can move at any given time rather than operating simultaneously. So as part of the proposal, and I'll speak to the attachment, the exhibit that's included within this zoning amendment that details the improvements that are proposed to be made, much of it has to do with these timing inefficiencies that I spoke about. So the first optimization or efficiency change that we would be proposing is to allow both the eastbound and westbound approach to move at the same time. If you're familiar with this intersection, when you're given the green cycle there is nothing telling you that you are operating under a protected phase. And by protected, I mean typically when you're under a protected phase, you have what's called a left turn green arrow. Because of the absence of that, you have a hesitation when drivers do receive the green ball or a part of the green cycle, and that they're not quite sure, did the approach across me stop? Do I need to wait for that to clear through the intersection? When under existing conditions, it's only one approach moving at a time on the county road approaches. Our proposal would be to install new traffic signal equipment, making it very clear who has the right of way and at what time, to remove that lost time and remove that hesitation from the intersection. This has immediate efficiency effects, immediate benefits to the operation of the intersection. In addition to that, what we're proposing as part of working with the Bed 1 property owner and as part of the improvements proposed is to eliminate the lane drop and provide for that second through lane along 202, 206 southbound to continue past the frontage of the subject property. That allows us, I know it may seem to be insignificant, but that allows us to fill that rightmost lane with vehicles, as you see in the still image that you have here. We're now filling about 100 to 150 feet with vehicles rather than adding them to the back of this single file queue, which extends through Pluckerman. And in addition to that, by making the timing more efficient in the cycling of the traffic signal, we would be adding about 60 seconds of green time to the peak hour of the northbound and southbound approach of this intersection. Now, typically, traffic engineers of old would improve or they would propose improvements on the order of, let's have eminent domain takings, let's widen the intersection, let's propose more through travel lanes, and that is not what we need to do here to make this intersection operate more efficiently. And in a moment, I will show what we're looking at in terms of the improvements that are being proposed as part of the intersection itself. Bear with me for just one moment. Let's see if I just try this again. So bring it up, there we go. And everyone can hopefully see the screen showing an aerial overlay of the improvements that are being proposed. And before I do that, I'd like to just show you what the screenshot of that video shows at 5:30. At right about 5:30, that southbound queue with no vehicles stacked in the rightmost lane in 202, 206 southbound, you can see it here extends all the way through Pluckerman, through the intersection at Hills Drive. And what you'll also notice in this still image is very little, if any, traffic demand located at the eastbound and westbound legs of the intersection. And we are attempting in this proposal with these improvements to utilize every bit of capacity, very, very different than what's happening under existing conditions, use every bit of capacity that we have in this intersection. Starting with the southbound leg of the intersection, our proposal is to pull the stop bar down closer into the intersection so we get about one more car length at each of the approach lanes, both the middle lane and the rightmost lane. This allows for the ability to stack more vehicles in each of those lanes, giving us more capacity at the approach. We're also proposing new traffic signal equipment, those left turn green arrows, which you'll see in the legend, a 4-section traffic signal head, which allows for clarity in the design so that we're not wasting time with driver hesitation, motorist hesitation as they're traveling through the intersection. The next leg of this, we're changing orientation slightly So the intersection that we were just taking a look at to the north is now located to the left-hand side. And you'll note what I was previously speaking about, which is the lane drop. By lane drop, I mean this rightmost lane is a right-only lane into the site. And by virtue of that, the vehicles that are traveling from the intersection that may be in the through lane know that they need to move over and weave into the leftmost lane to continue on their way if they're traveling past the subject property. What we are proposing to do is to eliminate that whole maneuvering that occurs and allow for a second through lane to travel south of the Bed 1 property past Route 78. We would expect about a 15 to 20% improvement in the overall intersection operation. We would expect about anywhere from 40 to 60 more vehicles to be able to travel through the intersection during the highest peak hour. And what this amounts to during the off-peak hours is significant improvement in that you will no longer be operating under split phases on Burnt Mills and Washington Valley Road. And we do all of this within the confines of the curb line. No takings, no eminent domain, no needlessly wasting areas for impervious coverage and taking out buildings or green areas or travel lanes that will just simply induce more traffic volume. We're doing this all within the benefit of the intersection as it is today to make it improve and make it operate in a more beneficial way to the traveling public that travel through this intersection every day. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Chuck, there's one more element of the ordinance, which is the ring road at the Bed 1 campus, and that the ordinance would provide a right-of-way or a public right-of-way on that ring road. Do you have a drawing that shows that?
You know what? I think I should have it. Hold on one moment. Frank, I believe that's in the zoning ordinance document, correct?
Yeah. Well, yes.
Attachment D.
Yeah. Attachment D. Very good.
Got it, Chuck?
Yep, I'll pull it up shortly. Oh, there we go. Okay. Referring to attachment D. Now, the intersection that we've been focused on during the most recent discussion is essentially located here, so to the top right of this exhibit. What we're speaking about is a ring road that would allow for motorist traffic to travel off of Burnt Mills Road, along the perimeter of the site, and then towards the southerly portion, along the southerly portion of the property and out to 202, 206. Now, this has a number of benefits, but I think Frank spoke about some of the great qualities of design that you see from the developer's design team, architecturally, civil engineering, traffic engineering, but much of what you see as part of some of these schematic drawings that have been developed more and more over the course of time is excellent connectivity, not just for motor vehicles, but for pedestrian traffic, for bicyclist traffic. And we want to extend that past some of the more focused areas of the renderings that we've looked at, which are along the Burnt Mills Road frontage, but also think about how that can work as part of the site overall. The goal of the ring road is to allow for connectivity between the public rights-of-way of Burnt Mills Road and Route 202, 206 without further constraining the intersection proper, the traffic signal that's located to the east of where that Burnt Mills Road driveway to the ring road first enters the site. And by doing that, we're able to pull traffic demand out of the subject intersection bring it through the site, do so in a way that is responsible and safe for both drivers, for pedestrians, for bicyclists, and to create somewhat of a meandering path along the west and the south side of the subject property between these two public right-of-way, having a positive impact by pulling vehicles out of the intersection that is already constrained, as we just watched when we were looking at existing travel patterns and what occurs at the intersection today. So it has a number of opportunity, it presents a number of opportunities, both to remove traffic demand from the public intersection, but also to create a pathway through the site that connects with the proposed redevelopment of the project, but also provides a public benefit to those that are traveling on 202, 206 and Burnt Mills Road.
Great, thank you, Chuck. So what the ordinance does, yep,
Do we have opportunity to ask questions?
you will,
Okay. Regarding this.
you will.
Okay, thank you.
So, and just so everyone knows on Zoom that we do have a public, member of the public who's here in person. So what the ordinance does, it promotes a mixed-use project. So retail, most likely retail, could be other commercial, facing Burnt Mills, so that Pluckamin corner gets some new vitality, and not just in the abstract, but the actual architectural elements are built into the ordinance. And what was, and look, I'll just say from when this project was first discussed, there are some architectural drawings that were provided to us. When asked for my opinion, I gave my opinion. When Carol Gutschall, from the chair of the Land Use Board, was asked for her opinion, she gave her opinion. Colin Hickey gave his opinion. Every member of the planning board went through the architectural and the site layout and gave their opinion. Because one of the most important things is, how is it going to look from Burnt Mills? Is it going to be Bedminster that we see? Or is it going to be Strip Mall, USA? Some direction was given to the owner to say, you know what? Take a drive around Bedminster. Go down Burnt Mills. And they did. And they went down Burnt Mills, they went down Lamington, they went up 202, 206, and they hit upon certain features that they saw in town. The architecture of the Pluckamin Inn, the Plucky. The architecture of the Somerset Hills Learning Institute, which to me is just a fabulous structure, both outside and inside. And that really was picked up by the owners. And they went back to the drawing board and came back. And they got comments again and went back to the drawing board and came back again. And they got additional comments. At that point, the comments were being refined to connectivity, to the interior operations, right? So we heard Frank talk about outdoor seating, outdoor dining, which we have not had in Bedminster up until this year. And everyone seems to really like it. So this is an opportunity to create more of a plaza atmosphere in the project itself. As we are a colonial village, not all the buildings are back behind a sea of parking. That concept was picked up by the architects as well. So they weren't just picked up by the architects, but they were built into the ordinance. So the ordinance would say, okay, here's the commercial face, here's the architectural face of the building facing Pluckamin Village, the residential is behind it. The ordinance says you can go to 160 residential units. But at a minimum, no matter what you do, if you only build 100, you still have to accommodate 23 affordable rentals. If you build out the whole 160, you have to accommodate 24 affordable rentals. So no matter what ends up being the subject of the application, Bedminster's affordable housing obligation is addressed by this ordinance. There's a lot of other details in here, the ring road, the commitment to the ring road, the commitment to paying for the the traffic improvements that Chuck just described. That's all in there. What I'd like to do now is, being a member of the land use board, certainly from the sitting as a planning board, Colin and I have been through this for what feels like a very long time. Certainly, let's open up to the Township Committee first for comments to our two professionals, to Chuck and Frank, and any other questions regarding not just their presentation, but any of the elements of the ordinance itself. So Doug? You don't have to.
I'm gonna pass this
Okay.
around. I do have, comments and things, but not on that scope.
Okay. Colin, Renee, Gina?
I'll comment, Mayor. Well, I really like the design. I like how it really reflects Bedminster as far as, it has a certain look to it, almost like the building down the street, the school down the street. And I really, really like the ring road, the road that rings around the back, because I think that's going to also help to eliminate some of the traffic issues. And I'd like to thank our professionals for their detailed information in the traffic study. I had not realized that some of the main issue in the morning is that one light and the other one going that way. So that was really good. And also that third lane, in the evening does tend to back up because there's that kind of thing in the middle of the road, the triangle thing, I don't know what it's called. And so I think that, kind of addressing the one way or the, exit lane into Bedminster 1 might help with that as well. So I really appreciate all your work on that.
I have a couple because I live right down the street. So my first, I'll go just page by page, I guess. On the ring road, which I love that idea because it does pull traffic out of that intersection. My first question is, we are planning on having a right-of-way between the residential section and Pluckerman Park. So I just have a little concern that if that ring road gets busy, that right-of-way is going to be a significant feature. And kind of connected to that, I know a lot of my neighbors in the hills don't go down to Pluckerman Park or Burnt Mills Dog Park because they don't feel that intersection and the sidewalks are safe. So I was wondering if that was going to be addressed in this plan, which kind of hooks up to the right-of-way. If we have more people coming down Hills Drive, then that right-of-way maybe getting more use than we would think. Hitting on to the big intersection plan on Washington Valley Road, coming the heading west, so that the grocery store would be on your right. At that intersection of Washington Valley and Hills Drive, because Hills Drive now makes a ring and ends up on Washington Valley. According to Somerset County, that on the eastbound lane there are 3 lanes currently. The left lane goes into Hills Drive. Then there are 2 lanes that go straight ahead into Martinsville. And there's a little bit of a right lane that goes into Timberbrook. They tell me that right lane is going to be dedicated to the Timberbrook right-hand turn, and it will not continue forward. So I didn't know if that was going to back up into your intersection. And then I guess my last question is, at the on the 202-206, the south by Bed 1, where that lane does actually divert off and go away. Is there a reason that was there to start with? I mean, it seems If it's so easy to take out, why did they bother to put it there to begin with? And that's it.
Great, I'd be happy to answer the questions, Mayor, if you think.
Yep, please, Chuck.
All right, so first comment, which is a great comment, pertains to the ring road, but making sure that the ring road is hospitable to pedestrians, a connection to the park, as well as accommodating vehicular traffic, if I understood the question appropriately. There are certain treatments that we can use in terms of crossings. We can work with the applicant to ensure that there are safe and visible crossings for pedestrians, for bicyclists, where you'd also have an interaction or an interface with motor vehicles. A lot of the goal of this ring road is accessibility, but not necessarily high speed. We don't want to create a road that creates higher traffic volume through this project. So that will be a very important element of design. In terms of sidewalks in the public right-of-way, happy to look at whatever areas are of interest that we want to try to improve upon the pedestrian infrastructure. We are proposing to have pedestrian signals installed at the traffic signal, which would be an improvement with countdown timers. And in addition to that, we can take a look at the sidewalk infrastructure at the traffic signal as well. I don't believe any changes at the Timberbrook Drive and Hills Drive intersection with Washington Valley Road would have any negative impacts at this signalized intersection, but we could certainly take a look at that as the analysis begins to build as part of the application process to make sure that that is the case. And we can look over any Somerset County improvements that are slated for that unsignalized intersection of Washington Valley, Hills Drive, and Timberbrook. And to the last question, why do these very highway design elements exist in our existing infrastructure? Well, it really does harken back to a time where much of the improvement to the state highway system was geared towards vehicular movement and throughput. And in this day and age, as you can see with the design completed by Noah and Mark as part of the project team, there's a lot more thoughtful consideration and intentionality to pedestrians, bicyclists, forms of public transit, and then also the single occupancy vehicle or the motor vehicle. So it is, I would say it's a remnant or leftover from a time where state highways, jurisdictional agencies were really looking to drive traffic and push it through much faster without any consideration for other modes of traffic. And many of the jurisdictional agencies, if not all, have found the error in those ways and are looking to improve upon the infrastructure that we have out there.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. And also comment, Renee, to your first point, the connection between the project as depicted in the ordinance code. If you look at attachment D, and you see there's a line that says connection to Pluckman Park. So your comment echoes a sentiment that Committeeman Hickey raised at the Land Use Board. So one is promoting that connection between the project, the retail or restaurant uses, or whether it's an ice cream shop or a wine bar or a restaurant, whatever it's going to be, you're going to have the opportunity to have that great park right next door, as well as for the residents that may be living there. So the balance was enhancing that connection, right, from the park to the commercial and from the residential to the park, but doing so in a safe manner. And that attachment D actually reflects that walkway, in addition to the sidewalk up on Burnt Mills, but to have a secondary connection a little bit further down, so it's far enough away from the turn in to that ring road that you get the traffic to slow down and that drivers are not blind to those pedestrian crossings there. So whether it's the striping or whether it's, we won't say speed bumps or speed humps, but whatever other striping needs to be put in place to make that a safe transit for pedestrians and bicyclists. So that was actually a great comment, and certainly was one that went back and forth at the planning board level multiple times.
Thank you.
No? Doug?
On the plan?
Anything?
Frank, are you able to speak with respect to what 2025 even looks like for us, or is that just completely unknown?
At this point, I think it's unfair for me to try to imply that I have despite the fact that I do a lot of work for the court on Mount Laurel matters, for me to tell you that in 2025, rather, you're going to end up with this. It's very clear to me that right now what you have is an overwhelming abundance of affordable housing units, and you will have for Mount Laurel rounds to come. So if we have to deal with something else in 2025, I suspect it will be extremely close to what we're dealing with now. And I don't mean numerically, but I think the only obligation we will find ourselves with will be another family rental obligation. And depending upon the 2025 numbers, we'll be asked to do something that meets that obligation. And I suspect that it will be
Around is 2025.
comparable, if not a little larger though. So does that answer your question? I'm sorry, Doug.
No, it does. It just it was cutting in and out a little bit, but I understood what you were saying. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying it's impossible to know what 2025 brings. If you were to look into your crystal ball, you would look at it and see that it's got to make sense that there might not be too. If there was an obligation, it wouldn't be a significant obligation, but yet no one knows. And I think that's sort of the point of my question, right? We are operating in the dark here. That in terms of going forward and what Trenton and the state of New Jersey is mandating to all municipalities, not just Bedminster, but all municipalities, we don't know what the future may hold. Is that a fair statement?
Well, we certainly don't know that, but I do think that one of the things we know is that the Mount Laurel edict, the Mount Laurel case law, tells us that there will be an obligation in the future. Now, when we look at what the Mount Laurel case law has told us in the past, Judge Serpentelli ruled that Bedminster had an obligation for 819 affordable units. We ended up going back to him in the late 90s and saying, Judge, we built 698 units, and we think that we did way more than we needed to because the Council on Affordable Housing only said we owed 155 units. And he said, as I mentioned before, that we had probably met our obligation for some considerable period into the future, and he said halfway through the next century. When he said that, he wasn't thinking about the rental obligation. So despite the fact that we have 600 or 700, I think it's closer to 700 extra credits, we don't really have an obligation to deal with that says numerically we're short. As a matter of fact, numerically, when Judge Serpentelli said that 819 units would not, the test at the time was to say, would there be a radical transformation of the character of the community? And I think anybody who's lived in Bedminster in any amount of time before the Hills came would know that that was clearly a radical transformation of your community. They oversubscribed us for affordable housing. We overbuilt what we owed according to the COA rules. And now we're sitting in a situation where we probably have lots of hundreds of extra for sale units. And by the same token, we're at a case where the most important units to affordable households are rental units, right? They usually can't qualify for mortgages, or it's tough for them to do that, but they can sign up on a list of rental units where they can get served by that kind of and that's what will happen when this development gets built. I do think it's important because part of what we're going to see here, and I hesitate to say, but I have to say, what we're going to see now are Lux in Bedminster before, and people who would like to stay in town, and not necessarily stay in their home may find some of these units an incredible opportunity to have the best of both worlds. You're still in town. You don't have to be taking care of all that property. So my sense is that what we're doing now is good for Bedminster and good for our affordable housing obligation. And I don't think you have to feel bad that we are making this accommodation, because I think what it does for you in terms of our repose, as soon as you adopt this ordinance, it doesn't matter if they ever build anything. And I hate to say that because as a court master, that's not my ambition, but you met your obligation once you've adopted this ordinance. And what we know from working with KRE is that you not only have met your obligation, but you've got a partner here who's willing to make it a really good thing for the town instead of what might otherwise seem like not such a good thing. So we did a lot of work on it, as you heard. The planning board spent so much time being serious about how we could make a good addition to Pluckman Village that I think, in all of my experience, both as a town planner and as a master, I don't really think I've ever seen anybody come to the table and deliver this kind of a response to a municipal need where, you know, I almost have to say they did everything we wanted them to do. And I think that's true. So, you know, when I look back at what we're dealing with now, in 2025, we'll find out what the new number is. I believe certainly that we will continue to keep all of our overall credits toward affordable housing. We will end up with some other relatively minor obligation in the next round. The court so overestimated what we owed back in this, what was it, 85, whenever that was. I mean, it was really sad that the court treated Bedminster as though they were totally recalcitrant in trying to meet the obligation. And they impose an obligation where not many years later, the Council on Affordable Housing says, no, it's not 819 affordable units, it's 155. And if you multiply either of those numbers by 5, you end up with the number of units that the Bedminster would have to absorb. So we absorbed the 4,000 or so units that came with our 819 unit obligation. But if we only had to meet the 155 unit obligation that COA assigned us, we could have had, before this litigation, we could have had a Council on Affordable Housing determination of our acceptability of our plan that would have said 5 times 155 was what the hills had to be. And 5 times 155, I'm not great with the math when I'm not looking at a calculator, but it's nowhere near 4,000 units, right? It's more, it's under 1,000 units. And so we overdid what we should have had to do according to any court requirement. We're doing everything we have to do according to the current court requirement and the settlement that was approved by the court. I think you can feel very comfortable that as we look at 2025, if anybody ever says, has Bedminster stepped up and done what they had to do? I think we've done it in every respect, in every opportunity we had to.
And I do want to point out that when this, when the exercise began, so it was 28 rental units, and the initial conversations with the property owner regarding this site was for 28 affordable rentals. With the 15% ratio, that would have equated to a project about 190. 190 units. When Elite got approved up at Lamington and right by 206, and took 5 of those units, we went back to the applicant and said, you know what, we're not looking to go any bigger, any more than we need to. So it's not going to be 28 and 190. Let's bring it back to satisfying at least 23 and scale that project back in size from 190, and we ended up at 160, and the owner agreed to it. Doug, you're right, and you know, and as Frank said, we don't know what's going to happen in 2025. Affordable housing obligations aren't going to go away. we know we're going to be pretty solid on for sale units. The opportunity to do more rental, does that come in 2025? Yeah, maybe if we can get 1 or 2 extra units here and there. Yeah, we'll see. But we know we're going to be good on for sales, but we do know that affordable housing is not going to go away. The state is just going to continue, and these towns, I mean, I hate to say it, but at the same time, we hear folks trying to cut down sprawl in the state of New Jersey, but at the same time, these mandates are pushing it in. And, I didn't talk about this from a planning perspective either earlier, but as opposed to what happened to Bedminster in the 80s, focus development on already developed sites. Keep Bedminster what we have. We go from suburban and some pretty dense resi into rural areas relatively quickly. To me, this ordinance promotes that. It continues it. Hey, this is the village. If you're going to have density, you put it here. Not once again, I know you're asking about 2025, but I'm not sure if there's any more questions or if we answered that.
No, I don't, no more questions.
Okay.
I guess there's an opportunity later where we sort of can just, after the close of the public, we give our sort of
Yes.
take on this. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't have any
Yep.
questions for
Okay.
those.
All right, Colin?
I can give you some thoughts about how we got here, but,
Okay, sure, go ahead.
I mean, first off, Chuck, great job. Can we have Chuck at every one of our meetings? That was tremendous, loved it. Just a couple thoughts, and Frank hit on some of this, if we have to rezone to accommodate what's in that settlement, we better get what we need. If we don't rezone, if we don't do that, if we don't rezone, we subject ourselves to a builder's remedy lawsuit, and then we have no say. One of the things I learned as I was working with Mayor Holtaway on the master plan work was, why are there no interconnecting sidewalks to the different neighborhoods in the hills? And why are there no parks? It's because we lost, we allowed a builder's remedy lawsuit to be pursued, and Hills Development Corp. Basically got to call the shots. So as a result, there weren't amenities built into the hills, which was a shame. We can't allow that to happen here. That's why we have a planning board and a master plan and a professional planner in the form of Frank to help us advise and figure this out. The other question we thinking about in my own head is, if not here, then where? Where is there another piece of property in Bedminster? And if you read Frank's report, he talks about having to have a site that is approvable, available, developable, and suitable. So said another way, the answer is not to stick our affordable housing obligation in a remote hayfield somewhere in Bedminster and call it a day. We need to do the right thing. And in contrast, the wrong thing is to do nothing. So if we risk a builder's remedy lawsuit, and this is what the mayor was starting to hit on before, a developer could set their sights and look down Lamington Road or Burnt Mills Road and say, hey, we want you to put sewer and put public water down those roads, and that would usher in an entirely new era of development here in Bedminster. Folks, I grew up in Middletown. 30 or 40 years ago, Middletown and Homedale looked like Bedminster. It no longer does. It doesn't resemble it in any way, shape, or form because of the amount of development that occurred there. Chuck gave this great overview of the traffic issues, and quite frankly, a lot of that has been caused by the fact that, the DOT has not addressed the overall traffic corridor that I would say would start in Route 80, go all the way through Bedminster and down through Bridgewater. So our neighbors in the hills, our neighbors in Timberbrook have suffered as a result, and this has been a problem that's gone on for the last 20 plus years. Look, I'm all ears for anyone who can put money against this problem, because what Chuck described takes money. So if somebody can put money against that problem and make a substantive improvement, man, I want to hear about it. And last point, and the mayor talked about this, and this went into a lot of our deliberation at the land use board. We need to support affordable housing. We need to make sure we get money back in that program on an ongoing basis. We need to be prepared for the next round of our obligations, as Doug just mentioned, which comes in 2025. when you think about it, our affordable housing program is the way a lot of us got into Bedminster in the first place, and that's a good thing. That's, when you think about the Bedminster we know and love, it is a function of affordable housing. So this is the next iteration of trying to plan and accommodate just that.
Great, thank you. And one other thing, and I know Frank had talked about this, rentals. So I've been on Township Committee, this is, I'm in my 9th year. And what we have heard, or certainly I've heard over that time, is the issue about the condo and the fee simple condominiums being used as rental properties, whether that's on short-term rentals or longer-term rentals, because there is really no rental market or rental product of any significant magnitude in Bedminster. Developers historically would prefer to do condos, at least a lot of them would. But markets change. Elite, which under construction, picks up some of that in Bedminster Village. But this really addresses what appears to be a need with some interest in rentals in Pluckerman. And perhaps to some level, it takes some of that pressure that you're seeing in the condominium areas, in the for sale owned units, takes some of that rental pressure away from those neighborhoods and brings them into a property where they're going to be managed by a professional rental organization. So, I've heard it practically in every neighborhood, in talking to friends and talking to folks during campaigning. We got a lot of rentals in here, and the impact of the neighborhood is fill in the blank, right? So this provides an opportunity to, okay, you want to rent in Bedminster? Here's some product that's available, and it's being appropriately run by folks who know how to be landlords, as opposed to folks who are just picking up condominiums when they're on the market. They buy them quickly and immediately rent them out. And it's a story we've heard time and time again, whether you're up in Hills Highlands, you're in Hills North, or you're in Hills Village. We're finding that companies, not just individuals, companies are buying condominium units purposefully to rent out. And this provides a market for that. If there's no more questions from Township Committee, we'll open up the public hearing for public comments. So we do have someone who's with us, and since you're here, you're gonna get first dibs. So the microphone is right over there. We need your name and address, and give your comment.
My name is Timothy Galbraith. I'm a resident of Timberbrook, 302 Timberbrook Drive. And I've lived here for approximately 10 years. I moved in after I was engaged and married. I'm currently not the property owner. My wife is the property owner, Anne Marie Verramo, but I'm cohabited there.
Okay, welcome.
But I am married. So,
welcome.
But she is.
We're not going to
property owner.
We're not going to ask for ID.
A couple of questions that I have after I've read the document and gone through and come to the meeting. First, who is the developer for this entire property?
So this is not an applicant.
Okay.
So right now what we're doing is changing the zoning
Right.
for this property. So I do want to be clear, because even some of our professionals use the term applicant. The owner of the property is KRE.
Okay. So
which
it's
owns
Bed 1.
Which owns Bed 1.
Right. Okay. And so all of the development that is being proposed here is the owner, KRE, Bed 1, doing the development of this area.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, the zoning would be in place. If
Correct.
they sell to someone else, then someone would else have that same advantage of that zoning.
Okay.
But right now, based upon our discussions, KRE would be.
Changing the zoning for
Yeah.
KRE.
Yeah.
Very good. Second, I have a number of questions. So going through the proposal. One is, have there been any assessments done on the amount of water usage and discharge, especially going, is the water going to Environmental Disposal Corporation now, American Water?
This is in the EDC territory. So
Have any assessments been done on the amount of usage with the affordable housing, or the potential 160 units?
our understanding
as well
from
as-
talking to the engineer is that EDC has plenty of capacity.
Okay, and that is, we're talking about 6 acres for the housing, but also 12 acres for the potential development of the shops, et cetera, and this R&D area that they're talking about.
I'm not following the.
In the proposal, the 12 acres, the other 12 acres, it talks about that this is to be utilized as,
Oh, are you talking about, so the total impervious?
the total impervious
Okay.
is 18 acres. And the other 12 acres of space is looked at as being used for R&D, engineering, scientific investigation, product development, et cetera.
That's the Bed 1 property. So that's that's the zoning for the existing Bed 1 office complex.
So according to the diagrams, so maybe I need some clarification then on the diagrams. And so if we look at attachment A2, maybe we can pull that up on the board.
Frank, you want to go to, Frank, you want to take care of that? You want to do share screen?
I can do it as well, Frank, if that's easier. Let me know.
Thanks, Chuck. If you got it ready, thank you.
No problem.
Because some of my questions could be addressed by pulling up just that one document. That's great. So we see two main facade areas. One that is to the left, that is an L or a U shape that is facing to the left, correct? And then the other that is facing to the right, that is facing more toward 206. The one facing to that one right there that you have your cursor over, is that considered, that area there, that U-shaped area, is that considered office space or family development space?
I should probably answer that one, because what this project includes is a substantial multifamily project fronted by non-residential uses, and they are not yet clear which would be selected, but we anticipate that there will be restaurants with outdoor dining and some number of other commercial uses permitted in that zone. So initially, just so I can understand your question, you mentioned that U-shaped element in the project was somehow fronting on 206, which is, I just want to be clear that it's behind the bank that fronts on 206, but it's along the frontage that has been undeveloped, largely undeveloped, since Bedminster 1 was built. So what we're doing is infilling the village with a mixed-use project that has become sort of the industry standard for not only meeting your affordable housing obligation, but more importantly, for providing the kind of luxury apartment rentals where somebody who wants to live in Bedminster can go to the rental office, fill out an application, and within a month or two, probably find a place to rent. I'm not sure how quick, but I'll leave that to the developers. But the point is, right now, if you want to rent a unit at the Hills, you certainly can. You can't go sign up any place to do that, but you can find somebody who will rent you one. And I think what we're really talking about is creating a next level of opportunity in Bedminster where people who would like to stay in town, would like to have an amenity supplied development that they live in, can live in the same town they've always lived in, but not necessarily in the same house. And I'm not sure that answers your question, but I hope it gets that, your question.
Well, to kind of build on that, how many levels or what is the total height? How many levels, 2, 3, 4 levels are we looking at for the total design of this area? I see that the facade there on that particular picture looks like it may be 2 levels or 3 levels maximum.
Right, that's
I want
correct.
to pose the question.
Yeah.
So is that
right now we're looking at a 2-story development
okay?
because it's relatively spread out.
Okay, and so for that entire area that we looked at for all of that developed area, are you then? We all live in this area, so in Somerville, where the ShopRite is located, that is a developed area, and adjacent to where that ShopRite is, there are apartments that are up above. And then there is shopping, there is coffee shops, there are small restaurants, etc., that are right in that area. Just in general, is that what you envision this to become? Only additionally with places to sit and eat and gather, etc.?
Let me just try to clarify what you're asking and make sure I get it right. You're talking about the development in Somerville that is behind, at this point, I think what you mean is the shopping center, the supermarket is behind the existing development. The existing development comes right out to the curb and meets the street. It's in the middle, it's in a part of Somerville, almost the middle of town, where that's the appropriate format for development. And it's very different from what's proposed here. What's proposed here is much lower in height, and it's also different in its orientation to the street. You know, what we're really talking about here is instead of a new development that's shoved right up on the sidewalk, and we talked about whether that was the right approach to take, to put it up on the sidewalk. But what we ultimately concluded was that the right way to service this development was to have access in the front, access in the rear, and an opportunity in the front where the access that we create doesn't prevent us from having a vital streetscape opportunity, both on the restaurant side. And if you notice in the concept plan, there's a little pagoda kind of separate building out very close to the street that will create an opportunity for real engagement with the public for whatever activities going on in that place. So we're really trying to energize the street. We're trying to get something different going. But if you drive into Somerville and you look at that project, you're looking at about 3 more stories than we're proposing.
Right. Yeah, that's one bonus with this, is that it is much smaller. Agreed. Another question that I had was regarding impacts to the current electrical grid. I did note that there are uses in the zoning for using solar on the roof panels and things along that line, which would be certainly encouraged. But certainly in this area, we are impacted still pretty dramatically with outages. I live in Timberbrook, and during storms and so forth, we regularly have outages that occur. And certainly something of this magnitude just would be a further draw on the grid. Are there improvements that the contractor or KRE or someone with is it JCP&L,
JCP&L.
or that would be required to be done for something like this?
So your question raises a couple issues. So in discussions that we've had with JCP&L, and we've had plenty of conversations with JCP&L, the issue has not been one of capacity or usage. It's been one about JCP&L's infrastructure and trees and wind and that sort of thing. So there's plenty of capacity or electrical to address the consumption from this project. So the outages that we've all experienced here in Bedminster are not necessarily because of a blackout caused by under capacity or under transmission. It's really physically the line gets hit, or there's a tree hits a line up in P-PAC, and for some reason Four Oaks goes down, or someone hits a pole on Lamington, and all of a sudden your neighborhood goes down, and we're all trying to figure out, like, well, geez, well, how does that impact that neighborhood but not your neighbors? So it's just the way that the lines feed into town. But it's really, we've not seen a situation where it's been the consumption has caused.
So it's really more infrastructure then, would you say?
Yeah.
Then certainly this would be a huge concern for new residents or new building that's going on in that area. If something like that were to continue, our discussions always continue with JCP&L. And those conversations with JCP&L
remain ongoing.
Very good.
Both Committeeman Hickey and I continue to dialogue with JCP&L on additional improvements, both within the hills, so within the condominium neighborhoods, as well as the lines that run into those systems. And Colin, I'm not sure if you want to.
No, you've got, we have 5 circuits that feed Bedminster right now. So we all have underground lines where we live, but unfortunately they're all fed by lines that are above the ground and go through heavily wooded areas. So not only are they focusing on making sure they're doing more aggressive trimming so that you don't have trees falling on the lines, but if the power does go out, if a line goes out, how do they reroute power? So we've asked them, and they've obliged, where they are installing new transformers. So that if the power goes out, it reroutes almost instantaneously, and then a new feed can be established to serve the homes and businesses in our immediate area. And that's been a project that's been going on over the last about 18 months and will continue.
Very good. Next would be schools. So if you have up to 160 units, is the current family still 1.5 children? Are we still?
No, actually not for. So the studies, and Frank can jump in whenever he wants, but rentals do not turn out the school children as condominiums or single-family homes do. So, that was, Frank, that was the Listikin study down at Rutgers?
Yeah, the 23 affordable units will definitely produce some school children. By comparison, the market rate units that are not affordable more than likely will produce something like 1 pupil per 50 units, or some ridiculously low number. And those are the statistics from the state. So we're really talking about 23 units, and the required proportion of 3-bedroom number of children. In general, this will turn out to be a really good rateable for Bedminster, and not so different from the building next door that pays a lot more taxes than it costs us. So I
Okay.
don't think you'll be disappointed with the fiscal impact of it.
And Mr. Galbraith, I can tell you because when the Blue Ribbon Committee, the one that Bob Holtaway, Mayor Holtaway, ran with, at the time it was just Citizen Hickey, there were sit-downs with the school. And even then, since that time, that was 2018, we've had additional conversations with the school. And I don't want to point to Committeeman Stevenson, whose wife is the school board chair, but there's capacity in the school. So it's not, the school is not at capacity or over capacity.
Okay.
The school has capacity for additional children.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily that the school kids, they're not going to raise the budget for the school.
So
Because
this is grade
they'll just
school
be,
that this is just grade school that we're
Yep.
talking about. One of the advantages of Bedminster is that we do just have a grade school, that we have the type, I guess the population set that we do not currently have a middle school or a public high school. And that keeps our taxes low.
Let me just jump in on you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, we have a middle school, we have an elementary school, which is under one building.
Okay.
So it's
Oh,
Bedminster
very good.
Township School, so
I
as
do
the
not have
kids.
children, obviously, that
No
I'm
worries.
sending to school.
But then as a sending district, we actually pay
Okay.
Bernards to take our children and educate them at Bernardsville High School. So
Okay.
we do pay for schooling through the 12th grade.
Okay. All right, that answers that. Next is, goes toward potential tax increases, and that would be due to potential increases in needs on municipal authority, police, we currently have a shared resource fire department, correct? Would there be a need with an increased population living in Bedminster proper that we would now, the state require a dedicated fire department for Bedminster? Would we need to hire more police per capita, the number of people that we now, with more people being residents of Bedminster proper, all that would potentially lead to tax increases?
no on the fire department and no on the police. So the state would not require us to expand either the fire department or go from a volunteer to a paid, so they
Okay.
would not, nor would they mandate additional equipment for the fire department based on this project.
Okay.
As far as police, I've had the benefit of being involved in the negotiation, well, not negotiations, but the discussions with DCA on our policing ratio to residents. We are well below the threshold that there would be any recommendation for additional police. So this project would not trigger a need to hire for additional police hires.
Excellent. And we had already addressed that Environmental Disposal Corporation, no problems
They've
there.
got- yeah, they've got
with
the
any
capacity.
increased
Yep.
capacity there, okay? Have they continued to do upkeep? I understand, doing a little research, that facility was built in the 80s just basically to service the hills and Bedminster Township, and that, they're taking on increased water flows from Far Hills and Peapack, Gladstone, et cetera. Has that facility continued to be upkept or improvements made, maybe when American Water took it on as well, to be able to continue on well into the future? Just
Well, I think I can speak from,
may
just
not
from,
be just from this.
well,
from
yeah,
this
well, actually, so just from the
forum.
land use board perspective, I'm trying to think if this was when Doug was on or Colin we were on. So they've actually come before the Bedminster Land Use Board for a couple of projects. One is certainly improvements at the EDC facility itself. What was it? It was like some giant filter screen. Do you remember that?
That might have been before
Is
my
that
time.
yours? No? So we know that they've been putting money into
Right.
the treatment facility itself, as well as a couple of years ago, they installed additional pump stations and backup pumps at different locations as well. And so we know that EDC, well, let's put it this way, let's not use EDC. New Jersey American Water
right.
has been putting more investment to maintaining the,
It's a regulated utility.
Yeah.
I mean, they have watchdogs that are looking over their operations as well. So I think that, I don't believe there's any concern with respect to EDC and the ability to service the project.
and they've got and they're regulated by, as Doug said, they're regulated by DEP, so they're
Okay.
discharged, their treated effluent is sampled probably on a daily or weekly basis. And so if they need upgrades, they've got to answer not just to us, but to DEP as well.
DEP, right?
I'll also tell you that, we fought New Jersey American Water last year with respect to a rate increase. The one thing that the BPU will not let the towns touch is what's called the Distribution System Improvement Charge. That's a surcharge that shows up on your bill every month. That's the money that helps them reinvest in the capital. And one of the capital projects was the old EDC plant. So that's specified there. So they have to allocate so much, like Doug and the mayor have said, it's a regulated entity. They have to allocate capital and dollars for the continual improvement of that system. So that charge, which we can't even negotiate, is used for that very purpose.
It's good as there, it's needed, and I don't mind paying it then. So, thank you for the clarification. Looking at the proposal, and I guess going back, whether Frank would answer this or anyone, again, going back to the 12 acres that are talked about regarding the research and engineering and scientific investigation, product development, et cetera, the concerns that one would have regarding this type of development or usage of this type of space, given that literally, a mile down the road, I guess that would be in Bridgewater Township, we have the New Jersey Center of Excellence that sits right off of 202, 206, and which is specifically was specifically designed, however many, over 25 years ago, I believe, that was built for that purpose. And I had worked in that facility as a contractor for 4 months with Nestle Health Science, and so I know a little bit about that facility, being able to get behind the gates and drive that ring, if you will, knowing that a significant portion of that facility, just looking at an aerial diagram off of Google, just the frontage of the New Jersey Center of Excellence, there are at least 10 buildings that is the frontage of that facility that is not being used. They are buildings that are not being used. And then one main building that is very close to Nestle Health Science, another enormous 3-level building that is also not being used. There's concern.
I think we lost the connection, right?
Yeah, it seemed like
I'm
it.
not sure.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not seeing the meeting anymore.
Yeah.
John Bellardo here.
Okay, so,
It might be that our time expired. I got some message about time expiring. It might be that maybe we all have to log back in again.
okay. We'll try that.
I'm gonna try to log back in again on Zoom. And I mean, I've been on meetings much longer than this with Bedminster and never had this issue. I had audio, but the video was gone. Now everything's gone.
Yeah, I never even heard of that before. So I guess we'll just log out and log back in.
Yeah, I'm gonna log out, Gene, and I'm gonna try to log in again.
All right, I'm gonna do the same.